last presentation I gave, well, before I get onto that, let's agree on one thing, and that is that if you compensate or incentivize people with money, you can get outcomes that you may not like. If this one doesn't do it for you, it happens to be current, happening earlier this month. If this one doesn't do, remember that in 2008 there was quite a large financial collapse in which the banking industry lost more money than they had ever made in their entire history. And you got to wonder, well, just exactly what drove that? And I think that our incentive systems may be at the bottom of that issue. So, and let me back up a step, because I want to talk about the last presentation I gave. And I didn't give it at TOC-ICO, but at an earlier presentation earlier this year. And it was about the reason that companies, which really have no limitation on how big they can get, right? There's no limitation on how large a company can be, and yet they stall. They grow to a certain level and then they stall. And the question is, why would they do that? And my sense is it has to be they're structured to grow to the level they grew to, but not structured to grow to the level they need to go to next, or they wish they could go to next. So, and because of that, because of the wrong structure, I'm not saying they chose the wrong people, but rather they had the wrong slots in their organizational structure, and therefore people couldn't quite fit the needs that the company required. So it blocks the growth. And if you're interested in this subject at all, this link here will get you to it. Download it from Dropbox. It's a little video that I made just practicing for delivering the presentation, so you're welcome to watch it. The reason I bring it up is because at the end of it, I concluded with an MBR, and it was a big whopper of an MBR, and I'm not sure the MBR is not the MBR that ate the presentation, right? It was a bigger issue. And sometimes it happens, you know, we come up with a solution, you've got the direction for those solutions, it's moving along, and then there's an oops at the end. And the oops at the end makes us say, holy moly, I like the direction of the solution, but if I don't get over this, I've got a real problem. And this is one that I ran into implementing Justin Rolfe Marsh's suggestion to build sales machines. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. And the real question here, the question of the presentation is, if we have a holistic, functional team, how should the individual members of it be paid? I remember asking Ellie this question, and he said, this is a problem that I've never been able to answer. And yet he also said the pillar of TOC is that all conflicts can be broken. So I assume he's just getting lazy on me, or decided that I should be challenged or something. But anyway, so here's a stab at this one. It's a nasty one. So I'm going to do it in the form of a story. And at the end of the presentation, I'll tell you how lucky you were to miss what you could have gotten otherwise. So, but for right now, this is a story about a fellow named Henry. He's a young man. He bought his father's company. He's having really good success with it. It's growing like a weed. Bought it 2.4 million in sales. It's now 3. Then it's 4.5. Then it's 6. It's just going like that. It's now 15. It's now 20. And that's the situation that the Henry's in. He has an old friend, and she knows that Henry has a company, and she's heard from other people that this company's doing well. It's a good place to work. You can make plenty of money. She wants to go there. So the question is, why? Is it because she's friends with Henry? Or is maybe this side more important driver to make her want to join up? I think it's the right side that made her want to join up. So what happens to Beth? She's got no accounts. She's a commissioned salesperson. 30% of the throughput she gets is pay. She starts off with $253 of throughput in her first month. And the company's built to support salespeople. That's all it does, is support salespeople. Everybody's there for the salespeople. The salespeople are the kings of this company. They really pretty much make all the policy. And this is her first 12 years. It is not just good, it's outstanding. That's $85,000 worth of throughput a month that she's, excuse me, I think that's, yeah, per month. 85,000 throughput per month. So she's up somewhere, you know, $300,000 a year compensation. And that's what's happened over 12 years, starting from nothing. So it's a great thing, right? Everybody's happy. And why did it happen? And I'm jumping out. You'll see the Henry's parable at the top, but then it switches to a black top that says analysis. And this is some sort of meta level popping out of the story to just talk about and analyze the story with you all. So here she is. She's got a gap. She thinks she ought to be paid 150. She's getting paid 25. And so there's motivation there. There's a significant gap in what she thinks she's worth and what she's currently getting paid. So she works to bridge that gap. And she does it by bringing in new clients, and she brings them in one after another. Works like crazy. Sometimes nothing happens. And then after a while, then big things occur. And they always seem like surprises, but it's long, hard work that she puts in to get there. So she's got this bias, pure bias, to bring in nothing but new business, and that's what she does. And so this is what happens next. It isn't like a oops or a little problem. You notice it goes down in 4 stages. There might have been a trigger because the 2001, the dot-com bubble burst right about then. But the strange thing about that is that none of Beth's customers are technology companies. And really none of Beth's customers excelled at technology companies to any extent. So although it may have been a trigger, something else is going on. So let me stop with you right now and we'll do a little analysis of what's going on. There's now an elephant in the room. Before she was purely just going after new business. Now she's got an elephant that she has to start worrying about. This is repeating business. In other words, the company sells products that get used up every month and the customer has to buy more. So she gets paid every month for the repeat orders. And she's worried now that these repeat orders could start going away. She may be fussing around the elephant, and that may be making the elephant nervous, and maybe that is even driving customers away. But she's in protection mode. And this is, Danny Kahneman talks about this. We typically fear loss twice as much as we relish success. So it's a natural human bias. And it's what's causing her to lose her focus on driving new business. But let's do the analysis a little bit more. Little bit more analysis on that. So she's also got past her goal of 150. She's now at something like 300 in annual compensation. What happens? Did anybody ever think about commissions as a motivator when the motivation's negative? It was positive before when she was at 25,000. Now it's 300. It's negative. She's a rich person. She wants to travel with her children and go to fine places and enjoy herself. She wants to enjoy her life. She wants to have the fruits of her labor. And this is a money-motivated person. It's just the person we want. What we really want when we're hired is an infinitely greedy person. But they don't really exist. They have a quench point. And hers was, she probably raised it from 150. Now she thinks she's worth 180. But she's at 300. So she coasts. She's not putting the effort in of driving new business. That's not the priority anymore. The elephant's driven the teeter-totter down. So what do you think happens next? Well, there's now a gap. She fell so far from her heights that she was now below what she expected to be paid. She fought her way back up. But on the way back up, she has no ability really to, let's talk about it, to forget the elephant. She can get heavy and force it back down. She can work hard enough on that aspect of the job. But the retention of customers is something she can never forget. And I see this over and over again with customers. Beth just happens to be a good example. And this is real data. But the first peak's the highest. The one where they blindly drive the red curve up. When they get that top place, beyond what they ever expected, that peak they'll never see again. So now we've got a process that works beautifully for 12 years and then starts to do what you saw back here on this chart. Hang on, I'm going the wrong way. It starts to go up and down. Next oscillation up won't be as high. The next oscillation down, maybe not as low, but it's a declining pattern. First it's a growing pattern, then a declining pattern. So the question is, what do you do? And the real question that I want to go to you and finish up the conversation about is, after this, if I go in the right direction, sorry, is this whole picture. What happens if you back off and you look at the whole group of salespeople? How is the whole group doing? And you can see this lovely correlation. Red line is sales, nice red curve. Blue line is number of salespeople. It's a simple problem, isn't it? If you want business to go up, what do? More salespeople. That's what you do. So it's the simplest thing ever, except when we have this problem where even good ones start to decline. So what do? You just add more salespeople. That's the solution, right? So as you add more salespeople, many of them don't work out. They're not Beths. They had no potential to be that. Many of them wash out at the very beginning. How long does it take to know that a salesperson you just hired, I really like you. You're a good salesperson. I think you're going to be great. How long do I believe that? How long does it take me to change my mind if he turns out to be terrible? If I'm lucky, they have to be really terrible for it to be a couple months. The experience that Henry's having is that it's 3 years, 5 years. They kind of performed well enough not to get fired, and if you really get on them, they do a little something, and you're like, there's a sign of life, and of course you want to believe it. And when the number of salespeople are up at 23, poor old Henry he's dying here. There's salespeople going everywhere. In the old situation where it was just a few of them, Beth had come in with a new customer, let's say. Henry, I got a new customer. We don't want that customer. What? I work to get this new customer. No, we don't want them. They don't pay their bills. Oh. What do we do? Well, I tell you what, go back and tell them that we'll give them a 3% discount if they'll pay COD. We'll get the money before we ever deliver to them. She goes, that might work. They'll love that 3% thing. That'd be great. Can I do that with all my customers? No, you can't do it with all your customers. Just do it with this one customer. Beth goes off and offers the 3% discount, and the customer comes in. Now, fast forward, 23 salespeople. They're all running around. Henry doesn't have time to pay attention to them all. He can't know everyone they bring in. They just come in, right? And when you don't have time to check to see if they're doing the right things globally, what happens? What do? Well, I get more deadbeats. That's true. What else? What else happens? What do we... They don't care how much new inventory you have to buy to service that customer. They don't care anything about it. They get sneaky. They become sneaky. And why do they become sneaky? Because they can get away with being sneaky because you can't focus on enough of them all at the same time. It's herding cats. They're going crazy. So this is the situation poor Henry's dealing with Beth. So I made this current reality tree. We're going to spend the whole rest of the time going through every single element of it. And Rami told me to keep it to 20, but I didn't know that when I came here. So we're going to go through this. There's only 30 elements on here, so count yourself lucky. Really, I'm joking. We're not going through the current reality tree. It is a legitimate one. If you're interested in this, go look at it on the slides that you get afterwards. But this interesting thing about this tree is it starts off being good. It starts off at the top instead of profits are depressed. Is that the laser? Profits are good. It starts off with not with stagnation, but with growth. But the negative feedback loops that are built in this tree, and don't bother reading the whole thing, but the dotted lines that are coming back down from the top, the hiring process gets repeated because the last salesman was a jerk, drives down to Henry has limited time, and it starts to create a feedback loop. And over time, the same process that worked great works like crap. So that's the situation that we have. And it starts to fall apart. This beautiful correlation falls apart. And worse, as it starts to fall apart, the complexity and the chaos go up and up and up. Profits are still rising. Up to this point, profits rose regularly. Now, it is also true that profits as a percent of sales were going down. profits in dollars are going up. What does that mean? TOC world, percent of sales is going down, but profits are going up. Pardon? Yeah, OE is going up faster than throughput. Now, the difference is still going up, but when the OE goes up faster than throughput, you can bet complexity and chaos are rearing their ugly heads. Henry says, oh, there's a price to pay for everything. He just accepts that as normal. And this poor guy, Henry, in this story, he didn't know anything about TOC. He's never read the goal. He didn't know anything about this. Just winging it. And so this thing falls apart and it becomes chaotic, as I said. So there's an answer. Henry's struggling for an answer. By the way, this is a very good time to read the goal. I'm not sure how you would know, but it's a good time. I didn't have the goal at this time, but struggle for an answer. So he considers, who's he going to point the finger at? Is it the salespeople? Did you salespeople do it wrong? Is it the commissions? Is that what drove them to do it wrong? People are good. Or is it this structure thing? And there's certainly the commissions and the structure are both down at the heart of this tree. And he realizes he's got a mistake. He no longer is trying to hire the top salespeople. That was always the mission. In fact, he didn't want salespeople at all. No salespeople. And it's really hard for Henry because the Henry in this story was a salesperson before he bought the company. So, and he believes in the commission process, and he believes that people shouldn't be limited in what they can earn. Those are hard-won or core beliefs for Henry. So he needs a sales machine a la Justin Rolfe Marsh, and he doesn't know how to build one. What do you do with the people that are already there? These people who did this fantastic growth for you and really have extraordinary skills and product knowledge. Should you pull the rug out from under them and say, well, look, we decided to go a different way. It's your fault. But really, Beth's not the one at fault here. She came into a program. Henry really is not at fault here. He just inherited a company from his father. His father paid commissions. He never made any decision to pay commissions, just the way it was. And for many companies, that's the way it is. Bigger companies tends not to be the truth, but smaller companies, it's so. So, and then it becomes the big question. The question of the whole presentation is, how should the individual members of a group that's working together be paid? And if we pay them the same as before, which is okay, you take the commissions that they were earning, you look at how much money that's been for the last few years, and you just make a salary like that. That's what Henry did. But it's not okay. Quickly you find out that Beth feels like before she had a clear measurement of how well she was doing. Now she doesn't know how she's doing. She doesn't know what contribution she makes. She wonders if she's being overpaid for what she's delivering. Henry may be worrying about this too. I'm not worrying about that right now. I'm worried about Beth right now. She's worried, is this fair anymore? Do I feel good? Should I feel guilty? They're not asking me to do as many things as I had to do before. So same as before may not be any good for her performance. Well, that caused the same catch-22s that we saw that caused the CRT to invert on itself and get unhealthy. And based on how the company does, well, you've got three really possibilities, and really only three. Henry likes it, but Beth doesn't. It's good for the company. Throughput grew a lot. Her salary stayed stable. She likes it, but Henry doesn't, or neither one of them like it. The chance for win-win really doesn't exist if we're paying globally, because she might say, it's not fair for me that the company has a bad year. What did I do? Or, and Henry might say, it's not my fault we're having a good year. I needed it. So Henry goes back to school, lots of thinking, reading everything he could get his hands on to try to figure out what the answer to this puzzle was. There's brilliant stuff that I think Kevin Fox sent me. Fred Kaufman's got some beautiful videos about this conflict between pay globally, pay locally, pay for individual performance. Fantastic stuff. I watched him over and over and over again. He said he spent 12 years at MIT trying to come up with an answer to this question. He didn't come up with an answer for it, so he left MIT, went to work for LinkedIn. Maybe that's easier. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy. I mean, I was amazed. But I recommend Fred Kaufman to you. So I read a lot of papers and so forth, and I start to summarize. Henry's coming up with a list of things that what the different people that he read said. And so then we got to kind of generalize it and come up with some sort of sense. And the sense that Henry comes up with, the answer is that we can't be bribing people in order to get the outcomes we want. And so how do you motivate people? And of course, I think the answer is you don't motivate people. They have some intrinsic motivations built into them, natural parts of being a human social animal, and you do your best to get out of the way and let those come to the fore. So these were the six, rather. I don't think that paying is better than sixth on the list of the top six. And I've ranked this in the way that I think are most important. The number one thing is trust. If there's not mutual trust, I don't think it can work. That's the number one thing that people quit for, because I don't trust my boss, or my boss is a jerk. That's what translation of I don't trust my boss is the boss is a jerk. The second thing is their personal needs that make them like their job. It could be, is the personality a match to the personality the job requires. And if it's a hand-in-glove relationship, that works great. But we tend to find these situations. We kind of overlap on a couple of fingers. But the rest of my job I hate, thank God it's Friday, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the interpersonal part of going to work at a place where people really, you like them, they like you, and it gives you some rewards. And then Dan Pink's popularized the middle three. I'll talk about each one of these a little bit. This strategy and tactics tree, we're going to go through this now. We're going to go through a deep dive on that. No, I'm just kidding on that one too. I'll torture you a little bit if you're not careful. But this strategy and tactics tree used to be called banishing bad multitasking, which is one component. And Ellie Schragenheim gave me a little advice. He said, there's more to it than that. And so this tree's been relabeled from a presentation I did a few years ago into enhancing anti-fragility. Because in bad multitasking is now a level 3 element. But the first one is getting the people to want to work together, gaining the will to improve, as you see up here. And then the first pass, and we do this when we buy new companies. We go and look at these new companies, and this is the first thing we do. We try to get in and see everybody and find out what's going on. And we pay some personal attention after making an announcement that what we're going to be doing is going to be for your benefit, to try to change this situation to something at least like this. If it's not perfectly aligned, let's at least make it a little bit better. So we announce and evaluate the roles, what personalities are needed, evaluate the personalities, talk to people about their personalities, how they work together, how you can meet each other's needs. These types of things, people love this. They love it. They will spend it's not like the meeting they can't wait to get out of. They will spend all day in these meetings. Try to keep them to a half a day. It's a challenge. You want to drive home afterwards. I did it recently in Chicago, and to drive home afterwards. I didn't leave Chicago to drive to Louisville, Kentucky until 6:30 at night. It makes for a late arrival back home after a 6-hour drive. But they just won't let it go. I want my wife. I want to know my wife's personality, but the wife doesn't, by the way, want to turn it in. Anyway, but these are some of the first steps that we do, and it can happen with an existing company, with a new company, with a startup. It doesn't really matter. And it gets both of those first two aspects. A little bit more on enjoying the job. A major predictor of people's satisfaction on the job is, do they have people they really consider as friends? When I have my birthday, do people from work come to my birthday party? If that's happening, they're getting something. People need social interaction. It's a requirement. We're tribal animals. They need to have that at work. If they don't have it at work, you don't have a very good hold on those people. So we want to have situations, so we've got to stop doing things like paying commissions. Why is paying commissions so bad? Because it makes people compete with each other. You're a new salesman, struggling to try to make it. You think you can do it. You're struggling to make it happen. John's an old salesman. He's a pro. What's John doing? Is he helping you be successful? I think so, not too. I think what John's going to do is smile to your face, and any way he can do to get you fired, that's what he wants to do, because then poor Henry in our parable will take your best customer and give it to John, who's proven performer, right? Because he's afraid he's going to lose the customer. Now, which is easier, going out and developing a new customer or getting his customer? Right. Yeah. Shoo. That guy was a complete jerk. I mean, oh my gosh. But it's terrible how we pay people to work against each other. We had to create territories for salespeople to keep them from just eating each other to death. I mean, even in TOC, we're worried about competing with each other instead of worrying how do we make more TOC. It's crazy. It's crazy. So never divide the tribe. Don't do it. Do whatever you can to forge this group together as a team. And if you do, you'll have a lot more satisfaction on the number 2 most important factor, according to me. And we can't not talk about pay. It has to be fair. There's great advice on this. Interesting theories by Elliot Jacks, who informs us that people have different time spans of attention. In other words, they look out different distances to see more about what's going on. By the way, give me a time check. Okay, so when am I supposed to? Oh man, this is going to be easy. You're going to get it early, like I promised. Okay, so they have different time spans, and the longer the time span, the more potentially good work they might be able to do. Which doesn't mean they do good work. It only means they have the potential to do good work. Now, sometimes, can you pay people for having their potential to do good work? Well, I'd suggest to you that if you have your MBA and your PhD, you still get paid about the same as the other people that you work with at McDonald's. Okay, so there's not really an expectation that, well, there is, some people do have that expectation, but it's more of an entitlement mentality, I think, than something that they think is realistic or real, that they should be able to get a high pay just because they have high potential. So, but you have to pay people fairly. They have to consider it fair. But you want to pay enough. This is Dan Pink's advice from his agglomeration of a lot of different studies. He's got a great video out. If you search for motivation and then the letters RSA, there's a great thing out on the web that 11 to 12, 13 million people have watched about human motivation. So you want to get this off the table. You don't want the conversations in the company to be about motivation. Excuse me, about compensation. So, and there's another aspect I want to talk about. We all live under two different situations. The social norms, where we behave the way we feel we should behave in order to continue to be accepted in our tribe, or to be able to gain access into the tribe we want to join. And the market, where all the love and the loyalty and everything is stripped off, and it's just a matter of, is it a good deal for the money? Lisa and I were just talking in the back before this presentation that the TOC Global Group made a mistake. And we talked about both giving free advice and taking money for advice. And it was a big mistake. It's my opinion, just me by myself talking about it. But it was a big mistake because we blended the market exchanges with the social exchanges. We're coming from a desire to do well socially and to help TOC. And once you slide down from the social norms to the market norms, it's a whole different deal. Dan Ariely, in his book, Predictably Irrational, talks about the example of a famous study in Haifa where people brought their kids to for daycare, and the people would come pick up their kids at the end of the day. And there was a deal where everybody has to, the people at the daycare need to get home and make dinner for their own families. But they certainly can't walk away and leave the children behind for the parents who don't come on time to pick up their children, right? So they're straining the social norms by taking advantage of the poor people that work in the daycare. So they enact a new policy. They say, we're going to charge a penalty for people who come late. It's a lot. Somebody I was talking to earlier said, yeah, it's $1 a minute. Well, all you have to do is decide if 30 minutes, if what I'm working on at work is worth more than $30, and it's a pretty good chance that it will be, right? So it's an easy choice on a market comparison to decide what to do. The hell with the people at the daycare. Let them stay for an hour. I got $60. I'm doing pretty good in business here. So, and once you slide down that slope to the market exchange, getting back is really hard, which is the challenge that TOC Global now has. How do we get back up to where we're just here to help more TOC implementations happen better with better outcomes? So this is the situation that we're in over here as well with Beth, isn't it? For 28 years, Henry's trained Beth to be greedy. Now he wants her to be just a loyal tribe member. How do you think that's going to work? Any advice? I could take this advice back to Henry, if anybody has any advice. Well, if you do any work on this, if you think about this please do contact me. I would very much like to hear. I'm trying right now to rehabilitate a series of people who are, and Kevin Fox is helping me. We're trying to rehabilitate 4 people who are remaining out of the 23. We've just let natural attrition get rid of most of them. None of them have been fired, but we have an unsatisfactory situation right now. We want them to have a meaningful existence. We want them to work hard for the good of the team. And for 2 years, they've been off of commission. As much as I can, but they don't want to be involved in the solution. They're kind of like Deborah Smith's customers. They don't want to be taught to think. They just want the good outcomes. So we have tried to involve them. We've involved them quite a bit. They're involved in everything all the way along, but it's somewhat reluctance that they get involved. Do we have a common objective? Gosh, I have to say we do, but I'm not certain that they say that we do. Yes, yeah, and I don't know that. I mean, I'd like to think we do. And maybe no way, but back to the parable, Henry's committed to try. Yeah, this guy, he's got a great name, isn't it? Anyway, so the last part I talked about a little bit, Dan Pink, I won't go over too much here, but these are the 3 that he talks about. And really, it requires some bravery on our part as business operators, advisors, owners, whatever, because it means trusting. This is where the trust comes in, isn't it? You give them the autonomy to screw it up. You give them the autonomy to make it go really, really bad. And the hope is that with the feedback, they get some sort of learning, and the learning gets to be more valuable until it develops into mastery, and then they really feel good. I really know what I'm doing here. I'm really good at this. That's something that people need, according to these popularized ideas by Dan Pink. And then this is, I think, your question is, what's the purpose of it all? Do we have a common goal or a purpose? And do they feel like they're doing something that's important? And I think if we don't, that's the ultimate, really. Number 5 here is the ultimate. They'll do a lot of satisficing. In other words, not having a lot of purpose in order to take a good job or to get a good pay or have just consistent income. But ultimately, the more they get those needs satisfied, the more important this fifth one becomes, and maybe it should go up. This is the order I think that you kind of, they cascade down on each other. John. Yeah, and this is where we started, right? And we started working with Justin Rolf Marsh on changing this sales function, that's what happened to the 23 salespeople that were there before. We just allowed them to kind of peter out as they naturally did. But these 4 were good ones, and we wanted to keep them. But now the question is, what's happened is they've moved from being constraint resources to non-constraint resources. And how important do you feel you are when you were the center and now you're a non-constraint resource where the goal is to have surplus capacity of you? It's a hard one. Lisa. Sure, tell me some conversation. I haven't quite got the questions, but I'll stop here. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. Kevin and I had that conversation yesterday, did we, or day before? We were just saying, but we had it again. Yes. Yeah. Understood. Yeah, Michael. I get it, thanks.
Might be a good thing. So, Henry, we've spoken about this before, and I had a similar experience, and it's a little bit different perspective. And we had a salesperson who just didn't want to participate. And I had a client actually challenged because, this salesperson was leaving. And she actually said, if the tools are so good, how come you can't keep this person? And something came out of my mouth, and I've thought about it a lot. And I told her, I said, really, how deep is your love? And I said, with a family member, when you're in a situation like this, that there's a desired state that you want to get to, your love is very deep, right? You want to stay with it as long but as a business owner or a member, we have to remember people have choice. And they have to have this thing called the want. They have to want, not in a cloud, the definition of want by a cloud, but they really have to have their own individual choice and want. And sometimes, with love to you, we may be trying to even push them, not pull them or let them go the way they want to go. We may be trying to push them into a higher purpose or let's just say, a very full life. And people have choice to have a full life, a meaningful life, meaning in life, or just wait till they can get a beer this weekend, right? And there's nothing wrong with any of that, right? But sometimes I think as the brilliant, we'll say brilliant in quote, advisors we all think we are, we end up actually pushing a lot, even when we're pretending to tell ourselves that we're kind of trying to create this wonderful environment for people to do these great things. Well, maybe they don't want to. And hey, that's okay if they don't want to. At some point, even you should ask yourself, are you moving from patience to tolerance? and not tolerance in the modern definition of tolerance. When you're tolerating something, maybe it's time to ask a question and say, hey, you have choice. This is not the environment for the choice that you're making. Maybe you need to move on.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very good point.
Hi, Henry. In my experiences with trying to switch from performance-based pay to salaries, when we dug deeply and say what was the resistance to this by the sales managers, the one answer that I couldn't dismantle, if you will, was unlike software development or a lot of other roles where there's intrinsic motivation to do it, there is a big chunk of the job of a salesperson that is negative, and that this commission structure is a way of winding people up, and that if one is going to take that away, what is your ability to get them over those humps of dealing with rejection and so forth? Did you get any of that in your transition? And did you try to address that? If that
Yeah,
was
I
an
think
issue?
we've certainly gotten some of that and tried to address it. It's a good question, and I think that the part of the approach that I take with people is just counsel them. I mean, I give employees advice on what's good for them. I'm aware of what's good for me, but I try not to include that in my advice to them. If it's to your point too, Michael, if we can go together for a while, that's fine. I don't say you have to go together forever. And if it's not working, let's be honest about that, and let's talk that through. And then what happens next? I had a salesperson once who told me, "Oh, I want to work for myself." I was like, "Well, that's great, and if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do, and you ought to go ahead and move towards doing it." And a couple of years later, he did. And he's had sort of a failing business ever since. I mean, it hasn't failed, which is really, you have to give him some success for that. But it isn't doing great for the same reasons that he was having difficulty as a salesperson. But he likes his situation much better. I think he would have made more money had he stayed with me, but that's not everything. Did I answer your question? Get me back on track.
So you did a lot of work with personality and so forth to get this idea of fit.
Right.
But nobody really likes rejection, for instance, or the very few. And so we tend to say, well, we're going to find people who at least are motivated by money, and then we can use that as a mechanism.
To compel them.
Right. And so if we take away that ability to overcome some of the negatives that, most jobs I find you can fit people to, and they do their work and intrinsically motivated. Is sales a job that there's no one who's a perfect fit for that role?
Yeah, and I think the answer is yes, give you a short answer. That's what the last presentation was about. I said that there are, at least at this company, there were 13 different jobs a salesperson had to do, and there's no chance of one person being able to do all those jobs well. There's just no chance. So that's why Henry's not looking for salespeople at all, because there shouldn't be a salesperson in this organization. And so the question is, do the old swords get beaten into plowshares or something like that, and will a sword be happy as a plowshare? And that's one is a harder one.
Henry, the two mistakes that you can make here is you're using a commission structure when you shouldn't, and the other one is you not using it when you should. So simple sales, we know from the research, requires commission structures, right? Complex sales do worse with commission structures. The benefit of a commission structure is it provides very fast feedback to the person. So they know if they're doing a good job, they're getting good commissions. If they're not doing a good job, they're not getting paid. And that triggers the mind to look for, what do I need to change in my way of selling? So when you're taking away the commission structure, unless you're replacing it with a very effective feedback mechanism, and most managers don't have the courage to give direct feedback. And I think that's one of the areas that you can think about starting with the analysis is to say, do I have an effective way of giving the direct feedback? There's a brilliant book called Progress Principle, where they looked at what actually motivates people. And I asked the employees and the managers, and I came up with the same list. And I realized it's the same list that we are taught. It had actually nothing to do with motivation. And I then asked people to actually record on a day-to-day basis whether they had a good day or bad day, and just record what events they were experiencing. And from that, they did the analysis to find out that the two things that really motivate people is if they get feedback about the progress that they're making, and if they are not making progress, if the manager says, how can I help you? So just think about those. I think we often remove the commission structure, not realizing it's actually a very effective feedback mechanism about whether I'm doing well or not. And that can trigger me to change. Whereas if you just tolerate somebody for 3 to 5 years, you are doing a terrible job.
Right.
You should have given that feedback far, far earlier.
Yes.
To say you're not doing well, you're not meeting my expectation, I'm sure you're not meeting yours.
Yeah, not only do I agree with what Alan just said, but Beth's given that feedback. So let me finish up here. This is the whole list again, just the summary list in the order that I thought the priorities made sense. And now I promise to tell you what you were saved from. And so we'll come back to here. But I started off with 196 slides on this compensation conflict and how to break it and all that kind of stuff. So if you're a glutton for punishment, when you get the PDF for this, it has another 200 pages on it. And you could drive yourself through it. Maybe you have a seminar or something like that, or a half-day workshop or something like that. But it's all there. So any other questions? Is there any time left? Okay, any questions? Anybody, any other questions? Bring on.
I don't know why I'm standing up. It's just a thought that went through my mind, but we talk about salary as if it's a God-given thing. If I work for you, you have to pay me a salary. But it's actually something that we inherited from our forefathers, probably from the Britain in the Industrial Revolution. And maybe we should be challenging that assumption at its core. Because you said something that immediately rang a bell with me, and it is, maybe I can help her be more anti-fragile. And if we think about the Maslow pyramid, when you all know that it's pretty good at the bottom, that is why we go to work at every morning. We want the stability, the security, and we're fragile. And I don't have any kind of idea or answer where to go from there, but I think that's where our injection should be.
Good, thank you. That's good intuition. Anybody else, any comments? I'll let you go 1 minute early then. Huh? No, I don't know. I don't. It was, did I put a question mark? Yeah, no. It should be a period. I don't know. I don't know. Thank you all very much.